This video exposes how the United States, Europe, and other Western nations have actively supported the ongoing suffering of Ugandans and show no willingness to stop. Uganda, a country once filled with hope and promise, has become a nation where cries for change echo across its landscapes. For nearly 4 decades, the people have yearned for freedom, democracy, and justice, yet their voices remain unheard, smothered under the iron grip of Yoweri Museveni's regime. Museveni, who rose to power in 1986 promising a new era of peace and prosperity, has instead turned Uganda into a land of repression, fear, and unfulfilled dreams. As the years have passed, his government has grown increasingly ruthless, targeting anyone who dares to oppose or question his authority. But this is not just a story of a nation held hostage by a dictator. It is a tale of international complicity, where Western powers, particularly the United States and European nations, play a pivotal role in propping up a regime that openly flouts the very principles these countries claim to uphold. Despite clear and documented human rights abuses, torture, and repression, these nations continue to fund and support Museveni's government. They have directly played a big role in fueling the suffering of Ugandans, turning a blind eye to the cries of millions of Ugandans yearning for freedom and justice. To understand the depth of Uganda's tragedy, we must first confront the harsh realities of life under Museveni's rule. Under Museveni's rule, Uganda's political landscape has been shaped by brutal repression, systemic corruption, and the dismantling of democratic institutions. The constitution has been altered multiple times to allow Museveni to extend his rule indefinitely, eroding any semblance of democratic governance. Elections are marred by violence, voter intimidation, and blatant rigging, making them a mere formality rather than a true expression of the people's will. Opponents of the regime are not just silenced, they are hunted, abducted, tortured, or even killed. Among the most notable victims is Robert Sentamu, popularly known as Bobi Wine, a musician turned politician who has emerged as the face of resistance against Museveni's authoritarian rule. Bobi Wine's journey from the slums of Kamwokya to the political arena has inspired millions of Ugandans who see him as a symbol of hope and change. However, his rise has been met with relentless state violence. He has been arrested multiple times, beaten, and tortured, all in a bid to silence his voice and the millions of Ugandans he represents. In one of the most harrowing incidents, after a failed assassination attempt on his life, which took the life of his driver, Bobi Wine was brutally tortured in 2018 following his arrest in Arua. The world watched in horror as images of his bruised and battered body circulated online, prompting widespread condemnation and protests. Bobi Wine is not alone in his suffering. Hundreds of his supporters have faced the same fate. Many have disappeared, never to be seen again. Young men and women whose only crime was to demand a better future have been abducted, tortured, and detained incommunicado. Some are held in secret detention centers, often referred to as safe houses, where they are subjected to unimaginable abuse. Take John Bosco Kibalama, for example. He was another victim of Museveni's oppressive regime, abducted in broad daylight in 2019 and has been missing since. His crime? Speaking up against the regime. Olivia Lutaya, a young activist and vocal supporter of Bobi Wine, was taken from her home by security forces in 2021. Today, she languishes in jail among others, punished simply for advocating for meaningful change. The brutality extends beyond the political sphere, affecting ordinary citizens who are caught in the crossfire of a regime desperate to cling to power. The military and police routinely use excessive force against peaceful protesters, journalists are harassed and detained, and freedom of speech is stifled at every turn. As we proceed with the video, just a reminder, this is the JB Muwonge podcast. Don't hesitate to tell us what you think about this issue in the comment section below. Share your thoughts with us and let the conversation keep going in the comment section. Uganda's civic space has been squeezed to the point where dissent is a dangerous and often deadly endeavor. Despite the mounting evidence of human rights violations, the United States, Europe, and other Western countries continue to funnel billions of dollars into Museveni's government. In this case, they directly fund the suffering of Ugandans. Ostensibly, This aid is meant to support development, security, and health initiatives. However, much of it indirectly bolsters a regime that systematically undermines the very principles of democracy and human rights that these Western nations claim to uphold. The United States, for example, remains one of Uganda's largest donors, providing substantial military and financial assistance. This aid has helped Museveni maintain his repressive security apparatus, which he uses to crush dissent. The very military and police forces that beat, torture, and kill Ugandans are often funded and trained with Western money. The same money given to Museveni in the pretext of aid is the same money he uses to buy tear gas, bullets, and all weapons of mass destruction used to silence dissent. The irony is painful. While Ugandan tax dollars are stolen by corrupt officials, Western aid continues to prop up the regime. The justification often given for this continued support is Uganda's strategic role in regional security, particularly in counterterrorism efforts in East Africa. Museveni has positioned himself as a key ally in the fight against terrorism, deploying Ugandan troops to conflict zones such as Somalia and South Sudan. This has made him indispensable to Western powers, who turn a blind eye to his domestic abuses in exchange for his cooperation on the international stage. In this case, Western governments, particularly USA, prioritizes their security interests over the human rights and suffering of Ugandans. They are willing and have continued to support Museveni, who abducts, tortures, and kills his own people, as long as he aligns with their regional interests. Europe is also deeply complicit in funding repression under the guise of aid. The European Union has provided millions in development aid, much of which is siphoned off by corrupt officials or used to sustain the government's authoritarian rule. For instance, the EU allocated more than 578 million euros between 2014 and 2020 aimed at improving governance. For the period 2021 to 2027, the EU planned to allocate approximately 600 million euros, around $650 million, to Uganda, focusing on green and inclusive development, democracy, and human rights. Yet there has been little accountability on how these funds are used. The money intended to support democratic reforms and economic development often ends up in the pockets of corrupt elites or is used to finance security forces that stifle dissent. The result is a vicious cycle where aid meant to help the people of Uganda ends up strengthening the very forces that oppress them. If it wasn't for this aid, the people of Uganda wouldn't be suffering. Specific examples of Western funding highlight the extent of this complicity. In addition to the nearly $1 billion provided annually, the United States has consistently supported Uganda's military and police forces, channeling funds into training and equipping units known for committing human rights abuses. A glaring example is the Special Forces Command, a unit tasked with protecting the president and notorious for its involvement in torture and other human rights violations, particularly against those who dare to expose the darker sides of Museveni's regime. Similarly, the Ugandan police force, infamous for its violent suppression of protests, has received significant training from U.S. agencies under the pretense of promoting law and order. The European Union is no less complicit. Financial aid from the EU, intended to improve governance, infrastructure, and social services, is often misappropriated by corrupt officials. Rather than fostering democratic reforms, these funds are diverted to bolster the regime's hold on power, with investments in tear gas, bullets, and other tools of repression that are used against the very citizens they are meant to protect. The United Kingdom has also been a major donor, providing millions in aid annually. In 2019, the UK gave £91 million to Uganda, including direct budget support that goes into government accounts. Recently, the UK has several ongoing funding programs, including large-scale projects like the Building Resilience and an Effective Emergency Refugee Response, BRER, with a total value of £210 million. Despite the documented abuses by Museveni's regime, this funding continues, with minimal oversight on how the money is spent. The lack of accountability allows these funds to be diverted into sustaining a repressive regime rather than addressing the needs of the Ugandan people. Beyond bilateral aid, international financial institutions like the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, IMF, have provided significant loans to Uganda, totaling over $4.86 billion in recent years. These loans are meant to support economic development, but often end up financing government projects that enrich the ruling elite and reinforce Museveni's hold on power. The human cost of this international support is immense. The influx of Western money has emboldened Museveni, allowing him to maintain an oppressive security apparatus and a corrupt administration. Ugandans pay the price daily. Journalists are silenced, political opponents are tortured, and young activists disappear without a trace. The very pillars of a democratic society, free speech, a free press, and the right to protest, are non-existent under Museveni. The international community's continued funding of his regime is nothing less than complicity in these crimes. In December 2020, during the run-up to the presidential elections, security forces went on a killing spree, targeting opposition supporters. Independent investigations revealed over 150 people were killed in just 2 days, though the government figure was cut short to 50 people killed, most of them shot by security forces using live ammunition. This was not just a show of force, it was a clear message that any challenge to Museveni's rule would be met with deadly violence. Despite international condemnation, there were no substantial consequences for the regime. Aid continued to flow, and Museveni remained emboldened, knowing that his international allies like the US, Europe, would not hold him accountable. The Western nation's stance towards Uganda is riddled with hypocrisy. They speak loudly about democracy and human rights, yet they quietly support dictators when it suits their interests. In the case of Uganda, geopolitical interests and economic gains have outweighed the moral imperative to stand with the oppressed. While they impose sanctions on other regimes for human rights abuses, they continue to bankroll a dictator who has systematically dismantled Uganda's democratic institutions. There have been half-hearted condemnations and empty calls for accountability, but no real action. The West has instead continued to tighten their friendship with Museveni. This is a glaring example of double standards and a blatant disregard for the lives of Ugandans. As Ugandans continue to suffer under this oppressive regime, the West must stop funding dictator Museveni.
First, we call upon the world leaders to stop shaking General Museveni's blood-stained hands through funding and cooperation. Secondly, we call upon the governments and organizations all over the world to impose sanctions on him and the people that he uses to torture and kill innocent citizens. Thirdly, we call upon all those who value democracy and human rights and the rule of law to isolate General Museveni because he has distinguished himself as an excellent violator of human rights who has no respect whatsoever for human life and human dignity. And fourth, we ask you to support our demands for accountability for the crimes against humanity that he has committed and continues to commit against the people of Uganda. Now, for far too long, the Western world has believed that allowing dictators to hold their nations hostage is an unacceptable cost for perceived security. Leaders who tolerate dictators and treat them as legitimate partners are complicit in their crimes. Please do not be partners in crime. Do not sacrifice your moral obligation for short-time convenience. Please stand on the right side of history. I thank you.
It is not enough to issue statements of concern while funding the very machinery that perpetrates these abuses. Western nations must listen to the cries of the Ugandan people and take meaningful action. This means reevaluating aid programs, imposing targeted sanctions on individuals responsible for human rights abuses, and demanding genuine political reforms. The international community must recognize that their support is not neutral. Every dollar sent to Museveni's government contributes to the oppression of Ugandans. It is time for Western nations to stop propping up dictators and start standing up for the values they claim to champion. Ugandans deserve to be heard, to be free, and to live without fear. The time for change is now. The world must stand with Uganda, not with the oppressors, but with the oppressed. Only then can we envision a future where the voices of Ugandans are finally heard, and their dreams of freedom and justice are fulfilled. Thank you for watching. If you found this video useful and informative, please consider subscribing to our channel, JB Muwonge Podcast. Share your thoughts in the comments and let us know your perspective on this crucial issue. Spread this message to your friends and ask them what they think about this important topic. Thank you and have a wonderful day.